Well, there is a deeper story to Keith than just Miami, and
Thought that I would have been able to handle what I handled. Daytime, nighttime, it didn't matter. It was always bad.
there's a lot more deeper. He's more deep and complex than just the song Miami.
For over 30 years, questions have surrounded the passing of one of country music's most promising stars. Keith Whitley left us in 1989 at just 34 years old, and the circumstances that followed have sparked decades of speculation. But now, through family revelations, tribute performances, and long-buried details coming to light, we're finally getting answers about what really happened to the Kentucky bluegrass legend who became a country music icon.
You know, that was the complication of Keith. He was hard to figure out, but he was easy to listen to, and he was...
They told me that I didn't know what I was getting into, that Keith was very addicted.
Well, I was actually a huge Keith Whitley fan far before
Before we get into what the family has revealed, let's go back to where it all started. Jackie Keith Whitley was born on July 1st, 1954, in Ashland, Kentucky. His family moved to Sandy Hook when he was young, a small town of less than 1,000 people in Elliott County. The Whitley family had deep roots there going back to the 1840s. His father Elmer worked as an electrician, and his mother Fay edited the Elliott County News. Keith had two brothers, Randy and Dwight, and a sister named Mary. Music ran through the family.
He's the greatest country music singer to ever live, in my opinion. And
I went over to his apartment with a friend of his, and we found Keith passed out.
And I try and do different Keith Whitley songs whenever I can.
Fay played multiple instruments and encouraged her children to embrace their musical talents. By the time Keith was 4 years old, he was singing publicly. At 6, he won a talent contest. By 8, he was already appearing on regional television. But Sandy Hook wasn't just about music for young Keith. As a teenager, he and his friends lived on the edge. They'd drink bootleg bourbon and race cars down those winding mountain roads at dangerous speeds. Keith survived 2 near-fatal incidents. In one, he was a passenger when the driver tried to take a curve at 120 miles per hour. The car wrecked, and Keith's friend was killed. Keith himself nearly broke his neck. In another incident, Keith drove his own car off a 120-foot cliff into a frozen river below. He walked away with just a broken collarbone. These brushes with the end should have been warnings, but they were just the beginning of a pattern that would follow Keith throughout his life.
Keith was the kind who he wanted to reach people through his music, and I think he did.
And we had to rush him to the hospital. But I knew that I could conquer this with Keith.
In 1969, when Keith was 15, he entered a musical contest in Easel, Kentucky. His brother Dwight played banjo alongside him. Also competing that day was another teenager named Ricky Skaggs. The two hit it off immediately. They formed a group called the Lonesome Mountain Boys and started playing Stanley Brothers songs around the region. Then came the moment that changed everything. In 1970, Ralph Stanley and the Clinch Mountain Boys were running 45 minutes late for a show in Fort Gay, West Virginia. The club owner asked Keith and Ricky to fill in. When Ralph Stanley finally walked through that door, he heard what he thought was a jukebox playing Stanley Brothers music. But it wasn't a recording. It was 2 teenage boys who sounded just like him and his late brother Carter. Ralph Stanley hired them on the spot. Keith was 16 years old. For the next several years, Keith established himself as one of the most talented lead singers in bluegrass. His voice was influenced by Carter Stanley and Lefty Frizzell. But Keith had something special, something unique. When you heard him on the radio, you knew exactly who it was. In 1983, Keith made the move to Nashville. He'd been thinking about it for years. While he loved bluegrass, his heart had always belonged to traditional country music. He signed with RCA Records and released his first album, A Hard Act to Follow, in 1984. Critics said it was too erratic, that Keith hadn't found his sound yet. But then came 1986 and the album, L.A. to Miami. The single Miami, Miami became his first top 20 hit. It was followed by 10 Feet Away, Homecoming 63, and Hard Livin'. Keith was finally making his mark. During that tour, something else happened. He met a rising country singer named Lorrie Morgan, daughter of Grand Ole Opry legend George Morgan. They were both married to other people at the time, but both were separated. When Keith asked Lorrie out, he made sure to clarify that he'd gone through his separation since they'd last met. They married in November 1986. The following June, they welcomed their son, Jesse Keith Whitley. Keith also adopted Lorrie's daughter Morgan from her first marriage. From the outside, everything looked perfect. Keith's career was taking off. He had a beautiful family. But behind closed doors, a battle was raging that would ultimately claim his life. Keith had been drinking since his teenage years in those bluegrass clubs. He once said in an interview that he thought everybody in the business had to drink to make it. He watched Lefty Frizzle drink, Hank Williams drink, George Jones drink. Keith believed that's just what you did. But Keith's relationship with drinking went far beyond social. According to Lorrie, who later revealed details in her 1997 book, Forever Yours, Faithfully, Keith's problem was deeper than anyone outside their home realized. She would hide every bottle in the house. She even went so far as to tie their legs together at night so Keith couldn't get up to drink without waking her. But Keith would find ways. He reportedly drank things like perfume and cleaning supplies just to get that feeling. Keith could be completely happy one day and drinking the next. There was no pattern, no trigger Lorrie could identify. It was unpredictable and terrifying. Every time the phone rang, she feared someone was calling to say Keith had been in a wreck, or worse. They had 6 great months early in the marriage where everything felt heavenly. Keith treated Lorrie like a queen. In 3 years of marriage, he never raised his voice to her, never said an ugly word. They had disagreements like any couple, but Keith was gentle and caring. Yet the drinking was always there like a ticking time. Keith tried to get help. He went to clinics and psychiatrists, but nothing seemed to work long term. The sad truth, as Lorrie would later say, was that Keith didn't really want to stop. Despite his personal struggles, Keith's professional life was soaring. In 1988, he released Don't Close Your Eyes, the album that would cement his legacy. The title track went to #1. So did When You Say Nothing at All, and I'm No Stranger to the Rain became his 3rd consecutive chart topper and won the CMA Single of the Year in 1989. Keith had that rare gift. When he sang, he meant every word. He once told an interviewer that songs had to strike an emotional chord the first time he sang them. It wasn't uncommon for him to cry several times while recording a song because he got so wrapped up in the emotion. Ralph Stanley would later write that nobody sounded like Keith. When you heard him on the radio, you knew who it was immediately. If he had lived, Stanley believed, Keith would have been one of the greatest singers Nashville ever saw. And then there was something else happening behind the scenes that Keith didn't even know about. The Grand Ole Opry had scheduled him for an appearance in late May 1989. They were planning to invite him to join. It was Keith's dream, the pinnacle for any country artist. But Keith hadn't been told yet. It was going to be a surprise. 3 weeks. He was just 3 weeks away. Early May 1989. Lorrie was preparing for a promotional trip to Alaska. Her debut album, Leave the Light On, was coming out, and she had tour dates booked. Keith volunteered to drive her to the Nashville airport on May 9th. Before she boarded, Keith handed her a card. It wasn't unusual for Keith to give Lorrie cards, but when she read this one later, the words felt haunting. Keith wrote, "Would you like to know what I wish for you? If I could have any wish I wanted, this is my wish, that in your life, which is so precious to me, may worries, troubles, and problems never linger. May they only make you that much stronger and able and wise. May you rise each day with sunlight in your heart, success in your path, answers to your prayers, and that smile that I always love to see in your eyes. I love you, Keith." After dropping Lorrie off, Keith went home to their house in Goodlettsville, Tennessee. That morning, he called his mother and spoke with her briefly. Then, his brother-in-law, Lane Palmer, stopped by for coffee. They planned to play golf and have lunch. After that, Keith said he wanted to start writing songs for when Lorrie returned from her tour. Palmer left around 8:30 in the morning, telling Keith to be ready to leave within an hour. When Palmer returned, he found Keith face down on his bed, fully clothed. Keith Whitley was gone at 34 years old. Davidson County Medical Examiner Charles Harlan performed the autopsy. The official cause was acute ethanol poisoning. Keith's alcohol level was measured at 0.47, nearly 5 times the legal driving limit in Tennessee. That's the equivalent of drinking 20 one-ounce shots of 100 proof. Small amounts of other substances were also found in his system. The report seemed straightforward. Keith Whitley had struggled with drinking for years. Now it had finally claimed his life. The day after Keith's passing, Music Row was lined with black ribbons. On May 12th, more than 500 mourners attended his funeral. Ricky Skaggs delivered the eulogy and spoke specifically about the dangers involved with such struggles. Keith was laid to rest at Spring Hill Cemetery near Nashville. But even as Keith was being laid to rest, questions were beginning to surface. Why would Keith drink himself to the end when his career was hitting its stride? He had everything to live for: a loving wife, a young son, #1 hits. The Opry invitation was just weeks away. Some theorized that Keith was conflicted about the commercial direction of his music. Others suggested he felt pressure from his newfound stardom. But these theories didn't account for the fact that Keith had been battling drinking since his teenage years, long before any Nashville success. Then there was Keith's blood alcohol level. A 0.47 seemed exceptionally high, even for someone with Keith's history. How could someone consume that much in such a short time? The circumstances raised eyebrows. According to some accounts, Keith had reportedly been on a 2-day bender before his passing. Yet, when Lorrie's brother-in-law found him, the house was neat and clean. The bed had been made. How did that happen if Keith had been drinking heavily for 2 days? In her 1997 book, Forever Yours, Faithfully, Lorrie shared details that only fueled more questions. She revealed that Lane Palmer, the brother-in-law who found Keith, allegedly discovered something else in the bedroom that morning. According to Lorrie, Palmer found a bag containing substances on Keith's dresser and swallowed the evidence before authorities arrived. Lorrie also mentioned shadowy characters in Keith's life. There was supposedly a friend named Sammy who only appeared when Keith was drinking. Witnesses reported seeing a man with Keith the day before his passing. Yet, Lorrie never heard from this old buddy again after Keith was gone. These revelations led some to wonder if there was more to the story. Could someone have wanted to harm Keith? Had something else happened that weekend that wasn't being reported? Then came, perhaps, the most troubling development. The medical examiner who performed Keith's autopsy, Charles Harlan, soon became discredited. He left his position in 1994 after 3 women brought forward complaints. He was known for inappropriate remarks and reportedly kept concerning items in jars around his office and home. In 2005, the state of Tennessee found Harlan guilty of 20 counts of misconduct and permanently revoked his medical license. Then, in 2010, the accusations became even more severe. Harlan was blamed for numerous botched autopsies that resulted in false convictions. A man had been convicted of stabbing his cousin based on Harlan's testimony, but it was later proven that the deceased had actually passed after a seizure and falling on a glass table. 2 children Harlan determined had been lost to SIDS were later discovered to have been taken by their parents. Harlan had been giving false testimony in trials for years. This cast doubt on everything Harlan had worked on, including Keith Whitley's autopsy. Some fans and conspiracy theorists began wondering just how accurate that autopsy was. Could there have been another explanation? Here's what's important. Despite all the questions, all the conspiracy theories, all the doubts about Charles Harlan's credibility, Lorrie Morgan and the Whitley family have never publicly disputed the finding. They have consistently maintained that Keith passed from his long struggle with drinking. Lorrie has been open about her feelings. In interviews shortly after Keith's passing, she said she felt guilty for not being there. But she also acknowledged that if it hadn't been that time, it would have been the next time. She knew Keith lived with pain and hurt and confusion, and now he was free from that suffering. She's called Keith the best country singer who ever walked the face of the earth. But she's never pretended their life together was easy. It was a living nightmare at times. She was on pins and needles whenever he was on the road. The fear was constant and overwhelming. In the years since, Lorrie has spoken candidly about what happened. She's done so to help others understand that struggle, to show that this wasn't some romantic tragedy, but a real disease that takes real lives. She put her career on hold to try to help Keith. She believed that as much as she loved him, surely that would be enough. But it wasn't, because that's not how it works. Keith's third album, I Wondered Do You Think of Me, was released 3 months after his passing. The title track and It Ain't Nothin' both reached #1. Even in passing, Keith continued to dominate the charts. In 1994, Lorrie organized a tribute album featuring Alan Jackson, Diamond Rio, Ricky Skaggs, and Alison Krauss. It included 4 previously unreleased tracks Keith had recorded in 1987. Alison Krauss's version of When You Say Nothing at All went to #3 on the country charts. In 1995, Lorrie produced Wherever You Are Tonight, featuring restored demos with updated recording techniques and a full orchestra. The album and single both did extremely well. Keith's influence extended far beyond his own recordings. Stars like Garth Brooks, Tim McGraw, Alan Jackson, Blake Shelton, and Kenny Chesney have all acknowledged how Keith shaped their music. Keith's son, Jesse Keith Whitley, has followed in his father's footsteps. Born in June 1987, Jesse was just shy of 2 years old when his father passed. He never got to really know Keith, but he's kept his father's memory alive through music. Jesse has released his own music and frequently performs his father's songs. He's covered Don't Close Your Eyes, When You Say Nothing at All, Miami, My Amy, and many others. When Jesse sings, you can hear echoes of his father's voice, but he's carved out his own path in country music. Jesse married his wife, Kristen, and together they have 3 children. Their daughters, Kimber Rose and Callie Rain, were joined in April 2025 by a son, Conrad Thomas Whitley. The name Thomas honors Jesse's grandfather, George Morgan, Lorrie's father, who shared that middle name. Keith's legacy continues through this 3rd generation. Lorrie has remained active in music and has been married several times since Keith's passing. She's continued to honor Keith's memory through performances and by speaking honestly about their time together. In October 2023, something remarkable happened. The Grand Ole Opry held a special tribute to Keith Whitley. During the show, Garth Brooks and Lorrie Morgan announced that Keith would be recognized in a way no one else ever had been. The Opry has a policy of only inducting living artists as members. Since Keith passed just 3 weeks before his scheduled invitation, he never became an official member. But now, Keith's name would be engraved on a plaque and included in the Opry's member gallery backstage, alongside every act who has held Opry membership since 1925.
In his last albums with Garth Fundus, I think a lot of that deepness and some darkness as well.
He couldn't be found one day.
Keith Whitley became the only person ever to be posthumously recognized as a former member of the Grand Ole Opry without ever being an active member. It was the honor he dreamed of his entire career, finally granted 34 years later. In 2022, Keith was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in the Modern Era Artist category. Lorrie accepted the honor on Keith's behalf. It was another confirmation of what everyone in country music already knew. Despite his brief career, despite his struggles, Keith Whitley had left an indelible mark on country music. The Country Music Hall of Fame created an exhibit detailing Keith's life and legacy. Photos from his days with Ralph Stanley and the Clinch Mountain Boys, images from his Nashville years, artifacts from his albums, all preserved for future generations to understand the impact of this Kentucky bluegrass singer who became a country music legend. In December 2024, Blake Shelton announced he would co-produce a documentary exploring Keith's life. The project would cover Keith's marriage to Lorrie, his struggles, and his lasting musical impact. Filming was set to begin in January 2025. By mid-2025, the project was confirmed to be progressing. It includes archival footage from the Country Music Hall of Fame and personal collections from the family. This documentary, when released, will be the most comprehensive look at Keith Whitley's life and career ever produced. For Jesse and Lorrie, participating in this project means opening up their personal archives and sharing their most private memories. But they've done so because they want people to understand who Keith really was, not just the rumors and speculation. So what have Keith Whitley's family finally confirmed? They've confirmed what was there all along, even if some didn't want to believe it. Keith struggled with a lifelong battle that started in his teenage years and never truly ended. It wasn't about the pressure of fame or creative conflicts. It was a daily fight that Keith ultimately couldn't win. They've confirmed that Keith was a loving husband and father who treated his family with gentleness and care. They've confirmed that he was one of the greatest country singers who ever lived, a voice that could make you feel every emotion in a 3-minute song. They've confirmed that the questions surrounding his passing, while understandable given the discredited medical examiner, don't change the fundamental truth. Keith passed from the same struggle that claimed Hank Williams and so many others who believed drinking was just part of being in the business. And perhaps most importantly, they've confirmed that Keith's legacy isn't defined by how he left us, but by the incredible music he created and the lives he touched in his 34 years. Keith Whitley's story is one of extraordinary talent meeting heartbreaking struggle. He had the voice of an angel and demons he couldn't escape. He reached the heights of country music success while fighting a battle most of his fans never saw. The family's willingness to speak openly about Keith's struggles has helped countless others understand that this isn't about weakness or lack of willpower. It's about a real challenge that requires real help, and sometimes even that isn't enough. When you listen to "Don't Close Your Eyes," or "When You Say Nothing at All," or "I'm No Stranger to the Rain," you're hearing a voice that was truly one of a kind. You're hearing emotion that can't be faked. You're hearing a man who sang from his soul, even when his soul was hurting. Keith Whitley left us far too soon. He was 3 weeks away from his Grand Ole Opry invitation. He was at the peak of his creative powers. He had a family who loved him and fans who cherished him, but he also carried a burden that proved too heavy to bear. The family has confirmed the truth, painful as it is, and in doing so, they've honored Keith's memory by refusing to sugarcoat reality. They've shown that you can acknowledge someone's struggles while still celebrating their incredible achievements. Keith's music continues to influence new generations of country artists. His voice still gives people chills when they hear it on the radio. And his story serves as both inspiration and cautionary tale about the price of fame and the reality of personal battles. What do you think about Keith Whitley's incredible talent and tragic story? How do you remember his music? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed learning about Keith Whitley's life and legacy, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more stories about country music's greatest legends. Keith Whitley may have left us in 1989, but his voice, his songs, and his impact on country music will never be forgotten. As Ralph Stanley said, if Keith had lived, he would have been one of the greatest singers Nashville ever saw. But even with his life cut short, Keith Whitley's place among country music's legends is secure. Rest in peace, Keith. Your family has made sure your story is told with honesty, love, and respect, and your music will live forever.